Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS. We are into week 13 of this college football season. Week 12 was very kind to me. 12-3 were my bets in week 12, so hopefully that continues into week 13. Got a really great Big Ten matchup here that we didn't necessarily think was going to be a huge game, but this is a huge game. This, I would have to say, winner of this game gets a bid to the Big Ten championship game. 9-win Indiana against Ohio State and Columbus. Let's do it.
Welcome to the SWUS. The SWUS. SWUS. Hey, get the SWUS.
All right, like I said, we got Indiana on the road in Columbus. Ohio State is laying 12.5 or 13, depending on your sportsbook. Total sitting at 50, pretty much 52.5. So let's get into this one, and we'll start with the streak. The number is 29. That is the number of consecutive losses Indiana has taken at the hands of Ohio State. The last time Indiana beat Ohio State was back in 1988. I was born in that year. My birthday is in August, which means I was just a couple months old the last time Indiana beat Ohio State. So will the streak snap here? So let's start with the matchup for the Indiana offense, and there's a lot of green on this graphic. Indiana 16th in yards per play, second in success rate. Look at the passing numbers: 6 in yards per pass attempt, first in success rate per dropback, 9th in effective pass. Offense is sitting at 3rd in overall OFEI, but they're matched up against the Ohio State defense, which is no joke. 2nd in yards per play, 3rd in success rate, elite numbers against the run, elite numbers against the pass. Ohio State defensively is about as good as it gets in college football. Now, the criticism Indiana's been getting for most of this year is that they haven't played anybody, right? I mean, they had a relatively easy schedule most of the way, and when we split the games up like this, through the first 7 games, they were averaging 48.7 points per game, 57.4% success rate, 7.67 yards per play, video game numbers. Now that they're starting to see some tougher Big Ten competition, we are seeing the numbers come down a bit. I mean, not that they're bad, but yards per play drops from 7.67 to 5.14. I mean, they're still averaging 32.7 points per game, but we're no longer seeing the video game numbers from Indiana's offense. Take a look at the passing splits here. First 7 games, over 310 passing yards per game, almost 11 yards per attempt. In the last 3 games, we're down under 198 passing yards per game. Granted, should have mentioned before, Curtis Work missed the Washington game. So one of these games was with the backup quarterback. But passing yards down under 198 per game, 7.67 yards per attempt. Again, not that they've been bad, but we are seeing the production dip a bit from this Indiana offense. And week 11 versus Michigan, it looked straight up bad. Just 20 points of the game, success rate below 38%, 4.39 yards per play. This was by far the worst offensive performance we'd seen from Indiana up to this point, and it was also their first real test, the first time they saw what would be considered an elite defense. So not a great look there for Indiana offensively, knowing that their worst performance by far was their last game, the first time they were really tested, because Ohio State's defense is even better than Michigan's, and that game was at home in Indiana. This one's in Columbus, and in their last 4 games, Ohio State's allowing less than 10 points a game, 4.13 yards per play. Yes, they played Purdue, Northwestern, Nebraska. There's some bad offenses in there. I'm saying this a little tongue-in-cheek, but you know what? Penn State is in there as well, and they held Penn State to 13 points in Happy Valley. So this Ohio State defense, I mean, when it comes to the Ohio State offense, you can poke some holes in it, and we'll get to that. But the Ohio State defense, as good as advertised. Now, if you are looking to fade the Ohio State defense, you can look right here. There were 2 games where opponents were able to make some throws on Ohio State. Obviously, the big game on the road in Eugene. Dylan Gabriel was making throws. Oregon put up a bunch of points. And also Aiden Childs was making some throws against Ohio State in the first half, at least. It got ugly in the second half. But there were 2 games where we saw Ohio State look a little bit vulnerable to the pass. So you could be pointing at that, saying, Kyle, we've seen this Ohio State defense get thrown on before. Indiana can throw on these guys. I could see that. But here's the thing. Both of those games were on the road. This one's at home in Columbus. And this Ohio State pass rush is just on another level from anything Indiana has seen so far. They're 15th in pressure rate, 1st in sack rate. Now, you can look at these numbers and say Indiana's equipped to handle the pass rush. I mean, their pass protection's been great all year. 25th in sack rate allowed, 18th in pressure rate allowed, 17th in pass blocking grade. And Curtis Workers also handled pressure really well this year. A+ QB rating, A- turnover worthy play rate, A+ yards per attempt. Curtis Work's been great under pressure this year. So you can look at these two graphics and say, Kyle, I don't care about Ohio State's pass rush. Indiana's going to be fine. But we got to keep in mind here when we're talking about the Indiana offensive line, up until last game against Michigan, they haven't played any pass. I mean, they haven't seen any decent pass rush. Actually, Nebraska's okay. But for the most part, they haven't been tested in terms of a pass rush. And in the Michigan game, we saw Curtis Rourke under pressure basically for the first time this entire season. In their first 9 games, Curtis Rourke has been pressured on just 20.7% of his dropbacks. That's insane. One of the least pressured quarterbacks in the entire country. Last week against Michigan, at home, by the way, that was a home game, pressured on 31.3% of his dropbacks. So we saw the pressure numbers creeping up. Now he goes on the road to Columbus against maybe the best pass rush in the entire country. Ohio State's pass rush is better than Michigan's. I wouldn't be surprised if Curtis Rourke is pressured on close to 40% of his dropbacks in this game, and that's just not a situation we've seen him in all year. And if you're expecting Indiana to give Curtis Rourke some run support in this game, I mean, I very seriously doubt it. In the last 3 games, they're averaging just 3.28 yards per carry, 41.2% success rate per rush. That's against Washington, Michigan State, and Michigan, all 3 defenses that are not nearly as good as Ohio State's defensive front. Nobody's been able to run the ball on Ohio State this year. Just 2.79 yards per carry allowed on the season, 35.9% success rate per rush. They're allowing just 90.7 rushing yards per game. So Rourke's not going to have run support. I think he's going to be under pressure at a level we haven't seen yet this year. I don't like this matchup for Indiana's offense. I could see Ohio State's defense really dominating this game. But then we flip it over to the other side and look at the matchup for Ohio State's offense. And again, we're looking at nothing but green on these graphics. Indiana, 4th in yards per play, 11th in success rate. Ohio State's offense, 3rd in yards per play, 4th in success rate. Ohio State can run it. They can pass it. I know there were doubts there about Ohio State's run game. They were having problems on the offensive line, some injuries. There was a 2-game stretch against Oregon and Nebraska where they just couldn't run the ball. Just 3.2 yards per carry, 102.5 rushing yards per game. But since then, they seem to have figured it out. In their last 3 games, they're averaging close to 5 yards per carry, 50.5% success rate per rush, 175 rushing yards per game. And that's against Purdue. Okay, that's a bad run defense. But Northwestern and Penn State has an elite defensive front, and Northwestern's got a great run defense as well. So whatever issues Ohio State was having on the offensive line, getting the run game going, they seem to have figured it out. In my opinion, the biggest question mark in this game is right here, because nobody has been able to do anything on this Indiana defense this entire season. They're allowing 13.8 points per game on the year, 5.72 yards per pass attempt, 2.46 yards per carry. Nobody's been able to do anything. This defense has been elite in every aspect of the word. Here's the problem. Here's why I'm a little hesitant to just blindly back the Indiana defense on the road in Columbus. Look at their opponents. These are their top 5 opponents in terms of OFEI. So these are the toughest offenses that Indiana has seen all year. UCLA 61st. That was early in the season before UCLA figured their shit out, by the way. Maryland 57th. Nebraska 62nd. Toughest offense they've played so far this year, Washington, sitting at 49th in OFEI. And then Michigan's in their top 5 at 74th. Michigan's offense is terrible. On the other side of the ball, Indiana has been tested. They've seen some tough defenses, but as far as the Indiana defense goes, they have not seen a ton of dangerous offenses. On the road in Columbus, this Ohio State offense, by far their toughest test, and it's actually not even close. But here's the thing. There is one aspect of this Indiana defense I trust, and it's the defensive front. Remember, we saw this with Cignetti last year at James Madison. They had the most elite defensive front of any group of 5 program, and it wasn't even close, and he brought that along. He brought 4 of the pieces there from the defensive front over to Indiana, and it looks like he just picked up right where he left off. They're 2nd in line yards, 7th in stuff rate, 1st in pressure rate, 21st in sack rate. Nobody has been able to handle this defensive front so far. And Ohio State, obviously great offensive line, probably the best they've seen so far. But Ohio State has had some problems on the offensive line. And what do we know about Will Howard? You can rattle him if you get pressure on him. These splits aren't dramatic, but definitely a drop-off in production when he experiences pressure. I think Indiana's able to take away the run. I think they're able to pressure Will Howard. I think Indiana's defense is going to shock us and put up a fight in this game. And remember earlier when I was talking about Ohio State's defense that I said there were 2 games where quarterbacks were able to make throws on Ohio State? One of those games was Aiden Childs on the road to Michigan State. Well, Indiana also went on the road to Michigan State and played Aiden Childs, and they actually defended him better than Ohio State did. 16 of 24, 193, a touchdown, 2 picks, a 53 QBR. Indiana actually played better defense against Aiden Childs than Ohio State did. So who am I to doubt 9-win Indiana? Which is why I think I'm taking the points with this one. I understand why the line is where it is. It makes sense. but I don't want to bet against this Indiana team. It kind of reminds me of the Oregon-Washington game from last year, where Oregon was 10-point favorites against a magical Washington team that was undefeated, and Washington was this super public dog, like a super square dog. Didn't matter. They won outright. I'm not betting against this Indiana team. I'll probably just take the points. I haven't bet it yet. Maybe it gets to 14. So I'm on Indiana here. I haven't bet it. Give me Indiana plus 13.5. I'm waiting for a 14. If I can get a 14, I'm in. I'm on Indiana. 9 Indiana. I'm doing it. If you want to see all the bets I have open for this weekend, head over to KyleKirms.com and click on Open Bets. Also, live show, 10 a.m. Eastern time on Saturday morning. We'll go through every single game on the board. If you're able to make it, we'd love to see you in the comments. Let's have ourselves a good week. Let's have back-to-back good college football weeks here. Please remember to bet responsibly. Hit me up in the Discord if you need me.